It's called A Gentleman from Japan.
Thomas, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come here this early morning. You live where?
Chiba.
Chiba. Way across the Tokyo
Makuhari,
Channel.
near where
Makuhari,
you go for your
to,
guitar.
way over there.
Jamming.
That's a nice area. I like that area.
That's right.
That's really, really nice. It's really developed. I remember when it was just rice fields. I'm just kidding.
No, it was sea. It was sea
It was,
before.
and it was landfill. I know it's all landfill land.
It was a rubbish dump. It was a garbage dump. That's where they used to dump the garbage.
No. The garbage, they didn't dump it there.
They did. They took it on in the Edo period. 200
Edo
years ago.
period, because then they did it over here in Odaiba.
Oh, good.
They don't realize that used to be a dump
It
area.
is,
So
yeah.
underneath all of that,
God knows
this
what.
is gonna. I was just over there the other
It's gonna
night.
go boom one day.
Yeah, you know what I mean? It's gonna explode. All this stuff's gonna.
You want to avoid a diver.
Like a big. What do they say? A beached whale.
Yeah.
They explode too.
Yes, they do. Yeah.
So you came here from. You stayed here overnight, didn't you?
Yeah. Down
you
in
have
Sengakuji.
Sengakuji. But you work in Tokyo too.
Yep.
Because teaching at Nichi-Dai.
I am a professor,
Right.
an associate professor, a researcher, and a teacher at Nichi-Dai. Yes.
What do you research?
History.
I think that was something you told me the last time we met. Listen,
Are we recording now?
we are recording.
Okay.
I mean, as big as we can be, but
Good
it
morning,
doesn't matter.
everybody.
Good morning. These two are your cameras. So these are the two
Okay.
that you'll talk to.
All right.
Whenever you say hi, mom, hi, dad,
That's it.
that type of stuff.
Yeah.
We talk to them.
Hi, Mom.
That'll make that. Yeah. Whichever one you pick. If you pick that one, it's good because that's the one you're going to talk to at the end.
Okay.
The red one.
Okay.
Anyway, Thomas, where were you born?
I was born in London
Okay.
in 1978.
Let me see. Where was I? Was here at that time. I came here in '74. So you were just learning how to crawl, or you just started to crawl? You're 4 years old.
Twinkle in my mother's.
Twinkle.
If you
No,
came
you
here in
weren't.
'74,
I came in '74. You said
yeah, so
that's
78.
right. What am I thinking about? You weren't even a twinkle
I
in
wasn't
your
even
daddy's eye.
twinkling in my
You
mum or
were
daddy's
the
eye.
last thing they were thinking about.
Probably by that point, yeah. I don't think.
Do you have
they're even-
siblings? Do you have
married.
siblings?
Yeah. I have one brother and one sister.
Are you the elder?
I'm the eldest, yeah.
Oldest, okay.
Yeah.
So they weren't thinking about anyone yet.
They weren't thinking about anybody.
So there's three of you.
There's three of us.
Okay, the boys are the oldest, and then they had a girl, and that's it.
That's it. Yeah.
How many years between you and your sister?
9 years.
Same mom and dad.
Same mom and dad. Yeah.
That's a lot of time. That's a lot of time.
Well, yeah.
Really? Are your parents doing well?
My mother is dead.
Oh, I'm
I
sorry to hear
hope
that.
my father is doing very well. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
How old were you when she passed?
she passed in 2020, I think.
Okay.
So I would have been 42.
You had a chance to be with her?
It was during COVID, so we
Oh.
couldn't travel. But she was sick for a long time before that, and I had plenty of time over that time
Mhm.
to be with her.
Mhm.
It was a mercy for her, to be honest with you. So I mean, if we
understand
look at
that.
that in a positive way,
Mhm.
you can look at death positively, and that was good.
Mhm.
My dad is well. He'd be 73, I think, this year. Yep, he's retiring, going on lots of walking holidays, that kind of thing. He's having a good time.
What did he do his work? What was his work?
He was a lawyer.
He was?
His main thing has been what's called in Britain legal aid. So that's providing defence for people that can't afford their own defence. He was instrumental in having the system revamped in the 80s, and after that he changed from the Law Society in London and started defending professional people who got into trouble during the course of their jobs. So, for example, if a doctor or a nurse or an accountant or somebody like that, for whatever reason, got into trouble, his point was providing professional help for those people. Often that ended up with people who'd been accused of malpractice or something like that, but sometimes, of course, people do that, and other times they didn't. It's just stuff being thrown at them by people that don't like them.
Those are the people that he tended to...
Well, he wasn't a defence lawyer such as I understand it, and I'm not an expert on my father's career,
right.
but he was coordinating the office that dealt with this kind of thing in Sheffield, which is in northern England.
Did you ever have to wear a wig?
No.
When do they still do that?
They do that. Yeah,
they do. I'm sure the head judge.
I think it's barristers.
The barristers. That's the top. The judge still wears it.
My dad. Yeah, I believe so. You need to check with an expert about
the barrister still wears it. Okay.
Yeah, and the judges. But I don't think my dad ever had a wig. He wasn't that kind of a lawyer.
Right. But did some of the lawyers in the past wear them? I think they had to, right?
I think it's barristers.
Only the barristers wore them. Which would be our judges. We consider that, we call them judges.
Judges are judges as well. Barristers are, I think, a higher level of lawyer, but I don't know. They have to be called to the bench. They're called King's Counsel. So what that means, you're asking the wrong man. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right.
We can get some experts in here if you want, and there must be somebody in the club who knows.
They probably could be, but we're here a little bit too early. They wouldn't be here at this time in the morning. But we really could, I'm sure. There are people here that would know all about it. Okay. This club is quite diverse. Yeah. We have over 60 different nationalities. We're quite like England.
Okay. Yes, that's about right. Yeah.
Here. So tell me, growing up in England, did you find yourself being more academic or more sports-minded as a little kid?
That's a good question. Nobody's ever asked me that before. I'm certainly not a very coordinated sports person, but I could run fast. I think I'm the kind of person that only gets motivated when they feel it's worthwhile being motivated for something. So if I don't see the point, when I was a kid, if I didn't see the point in doing something, I probably didn't do very well at it. So for example, maths, I didn't really understand the reason why I was being forced to do this at school.
What grade do you think that you came to an awareness of this?
Well, when you become an adult, you realize that you have to do whatever it is that you need to do to get on in life. At some point, you get on with everything. But I see it in my son now, and I hope he's not watching this. He does what he needs to do for some things, and for the things that he's passionate about, he goes in until he falls over and goes to sleep. So I see that once you have kids, I think, and you may agree with this, you start to understand yourself a bit better because you see in them perhaps what was in you once before, right? And maybe that's just me. I don't know. But I think I can understand myself a bit better through that.
How many children do you have?
2. I was about to say my daughter is not that way inclined. She's excellent at doing whatever she does. She just does what she needs to do.
Is she the younger of the two?
She's the older. She's 13. She's much more mature.
Don't tell me there's 9 years between the two.
No. It's 9. They're 13 and 11 now. So it's 2.5 years between.
2.5 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they fight like hell all the time. Yeah.
Verbally.
Yes.
Okay.
Verbally. Occasionally, slightly more.
Well, I don't think your son would get too. I don't think he'd end up on the best end of that end stick if it became physical.
No, they're still in the same size,
right,
roughly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I love them very much, but I wish they didn't argue so much.
Okay. And your wife is Japanese?
Yeah, Junko. Yeah.
Junko. Okay. That doesn't mean she's Japanese because it's Junko.
It doesn't. No, it doesn't. I was just saying that yes, she's Japanese, and her name is Junko. I like to call people by their names because it gives them more value, I think. So
it's interesting. As a child, you felt that you had to. I mean, you basically did what you felt you really wanted to do, and when you didn't want to, no one was going to stop you. When I was a child, I felt like I had to do everything. I didn't have a choice. It was pretty much that's the way it was made, because I'm your father's age,
yep.
And I think he probably grew up the same way. Yep. That was the time
sure
we just finished the Great War, and everybody had a chicken in the pot, and we were pretty well, but they were working hard. They didn't have time to give you the luxury of choosing what you wanted to do. You did what you were told to do.
To be honest, I still had to do what I was told to do.
Okay.
And I did. And I passed all my exams. But just. The exams I liked, the French, German, history, boom, up here. The other ones, the maths or kind of science, I got the C, which is the pass mark. And I knew that I had to get that, so I would do just enough.
Well, history you love too.
Yeah, that's what I have in the end been granted the pleasure of doing as a career, and I'm very grateful for that.
How'd you spend your leisure time as a kid? What did you really get absorbed with?
Those are the days when the first computers were coming out, the Spectrums and the Commodores of this world and all those kind of things. It was always fun to play those games with my friends, but my parents wouldn't allow us to have a computer. We didn't even have a TV until I was 6, and that was a black and white TV. I think I spent a lot of time in the garden just digging holes and playing soldiers and stuff like that. It was
with your brother,
or on my own. Yeah, both. I think we did both. I've always liked books.
What type of books?
I read lots of books, mainly historical fiction in those days. Yeah, it was all sorts of things. But yeah, I think I read quite a lot. Detective novels in those days, though I haven't read one of those in 30 years.
Do you have any idea as to how you developed this interest? I mean, was it because your mother reading to you?
My grandfather. My grandfather was...
On whose side, mother or father?
Well, both were into history and historical things, but it's my mother's father who was the most influential on me. He was a classics teacher, so a teacher of Latin and Greek, and he just told the stories of the ancient Greeks.
You're his first grandchild?
Yes, I was the oldest cousin. Yeah, he just told us all these stories as stories. I mean, actually, they're legends, right? So there's not history, but it's the idea of going back in time. And he was the man. His name's Lawrence John Weigel, though he hated the name Lawrence, so he just called John.
How do you spell it? Lawrence?
Yeah.
Lawrence.
Laurence, and then John Weigel. You'd say in America, Vigor. Vigor.
Okay.
Yeah. He was a fine, upstanding man, a school teacher his whole life, apart from in the army, where he's posted to northeast India and fought against the Japanese. And
so he was in World War II.
World War II, yeah.
Yes.
He wounded, flown out. That was the only time he ever went on an aeroplane until the 1990s. And he was, this is a very, very poignant point here. When I married a Japanese lady, he was really happy. It was like...
Is he still with us now?
I'm afraid no. He's been dead for 15 years now, I think. Okay. Yeah. He would have been more than 100 by now. He was born in 1916, in the middle of the First World War. So that makes... He'd been 108 now.
Okay.
Happy birthday, Gramps.
Wow.
But for him, the conciliation of the two of me marrying Junko was something quite special. Unfortunately, he didn't live to see us have kids, but he kept on saying, "When are they going to have kids? When are they going to have kids?"
So he met her. He got a chance.
Oh
to
yeah,
meet her.
yes, of course, yes. We were married in 2003, and he died in 2009. So it was six years there. So yeah, it was a wonderful thing for him as well as for us as well, and that always stays.
Did he ever get a chance to come to Japan?
No, not that I know of. I doubt it. And if he did, it certainly wasn't. No, he can't have done, because he didn't ever fly apart from when he was wounded. When he was wounded, didn't fly until 1991. And after that, he certainly didn't come to Japan. No.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, he probably never left Europe. People didn't in those days. They
stayed where they were. Yes.
Well, or you might go to a luxury holiday would be France for an English person.
For an English person,
that would be an absolute luxury in those days. It's not like today where you can just hop on an aeroplane and go anywhere, as long as you've got the cash to do it.
That's right.
Even if you had the cash back there, the complications of dealing with everything and making the bookings. I mean, you had to have a real specialist. You couldn't just go to Expedia and say, "Give me some hotels."
Right, that's true.
Yeah.
So he's the one that got you involved in really. I mean,
he gave me the passion.
He gave you the passion for history, and then you just ran with it. So after high school, did you find yourself starting to hone it a little bit? To get a little more defined with your interest
in
in
England,
history?
there's good and bad in this. In England, you can drop everything you don't like at 16 years old. So I dropped all the maths and all the science, and I carried on with French and German and politics, actually. I tried to do history, but the history books were so boring. I hope none of my history teachers are watching now. My history books were so boring, I dropped it after 6 weeks and changed to politics and government, which is it's always useful to know about politics and how the systems work. Many people don't know how the systems work, and that is a real handicap in life, I think. History I carried on in my own time, and I did a degree at a university called Bradford, which is in northern England, French and German. Again, the idea was to be an interpreter or a translator.
You were studying history, however, your language. You were thinking of becoming you were a linguist.
I stopped studying history because it's too boring. The books they were using, the things they were using.
This was as soon as you got into your uni or university?
16 years old. So
16. So you dropped that along with math and everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you went into the languages.
I went into the languages
German and French, okay.
and politics, law, not law, sorry. Okay. Politics, governance, that kind of thing. And then went to university to do languages, thinking I would become a translator or an interpreter. I didn't do that. I have every respect for people that do that, but it's quite a lonely job. You're sitting on your own, normally freelance. Translators are often freelance. They work from home. They don't see a lot of people. It's all coming through emails or telephone calls.
When did this become when did you start to realize this? Because you didn't know this going into it.
Well, I went on what we call an internship these days to Germany, Siemens. I worked there for 7 months, and I was in their translation bureau, and I met lots of freelancers while I was there, and I was handling the administrative work behind it, basically. And it just didn't appeal to me in the end.
But had you done it for a year by that time? I mean, had you been involved with it for about a year?
It was 7 months, but the 4 years of the degree, including the internship year, were all focused towards interpreting. This is when the UK was in the EU. Linguists were needed for all sorts of reasons, and very shortly after this, unfortunately, the department closed down because the UK has little value for languages and cultural understanding of others. And so, honestly, all of the courses focused at what I studied in the 90s have now closed down.
No, you just caught me on one part. You said they have no use for languages or cultural understanding.
No perceived use.
No perceived use of languages or cultural understanding of others.
I'm very sad to say that.
Where'd you get that?
Well, it's just something...
They never stated that. This is something you've just come to that conclusion.
Yeah, but if they had, they would have kept funding these positions and these courses. These courses closed down for lack of funding, for lack of government support, for lack of cultural support, for lack of interest in the nation in general. There was only 2 or 3 available when I applied for university in 1995. Bath and Bradford, and there may have been a couple of others, but most of them were focused. Most of the language degrees were focused on literature and other things rather than contemporary issues. Bradford closed down a few years after I left, maybe in the early 2000s. I don't know what happened to Bath, but I do know that there's a very, very, very big lack of anybody in the UK that can deal with languages at a high enough level for the UK to be able to actually act for itself at that level, rather than depend upon people from other countries to be doing the English, interpreting into English. And I think that's a very sad thing.
Now, why do you think they've changed their views and started to think more?
I don't think that's changed. I just think that I was the last year to get free university education, and that was the entrance year 1996. From the next year onwards, people had to start paying their fees. This focused people onto money-making degrees, and there's nothing wrong with that. People were paying for their, or people's parents or people themselves through part-time work were paying for their degrees and were expecting to go into well-paid jobs afterwards. The ones which would immediately provide the buzz of a financial success, etc., or an obvious career, started to drop off. And languages, unfortunately, in the UK, as I understand it, were part of that. There just wasn't simply enough interest anymore.
Well, I can see that automation also, the fact that our technology, AI, is taking away a lot of positions and a lot of need for running math equations in your head like I used to, because I loved math. It's hard to do that now when I can just type it in. I used to remember all of my combinations and all of the phone numbers of several friends. I don't know how many, but I could just run it off the back of my hand. You said the name and I knew their phone number. Now I don't know mine, basically.
I'm the same.
But why would you? Why would you when you can take your phone out, as long as you have the only thing that's necessary now that would bring all of us to our knees is electricity. If we don't have that, we're done.
We're done.
If that shuts down somewhere and all the batteries blank out and everything, we would be walking zombies.
Literally, as a species, we will find it difficult to survive.
Yeah. A lot of people would just die because their hearts, pacemakers, and stuff like that would just go out.
Yeah. You're right. And we wouldn't be sitting here underneath these lights with
and it'd be hot and warm, and it would be completely different.
Yeah, it would. That's something.
Be a whole different thing. That's the movie to be making.
Okay.
When all of that
That's
goes
your
out,
movie.
That's the movie.
That's your movie.
I'm not into that type of thing.
Announcement, ladies and gentlemen.
That's not my type of thing. I'm an optimist, and I believe that this is all for a good reason. I really wish we had spent more and focused more on HI instead of AI.
Because of human interaction.
Human intelligence. The reason why is because I think that mankind, this isn't our first rodeo.
No.
I think we've done this maybe 2 or 3 times.
Yep.
And the lost places of Atlantis and everything else were real. And I think at that time, the technology was so advanced that I'm sure they didn't need an iPhone. They used telepathy. And I'm sure they had to have some sort of map or something to make the pyramids. Impossible. Not a single one of those blocks are the same shape or size. And there's no way to do that unless you have a map or a plan.
The engineering, the architectural skill.
And the further we got away from that time, the worse the architecture became.
Well, that's one
Nobody
way
could ever
it.
do. No one could ever.
I'm looking at these skyscrapers here and compare them with the pyramids.
And it's completely wrong. Think about it, because these are too easy to fall over. They're not round. They should be more circular-like. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It doesn't make. These are like matchsticks sitting up in the ground, and the earthquake will take this all over that quick.
And then we build volcanoes. Then we build volcanoes.
I don't know what will happen. But I think because mankind has passed and been through this, and then we had some calamity, whatever it may have been, the few people left weren't the scientists and the smart people. They were the guys that said, "Okay, I need food," and their kids came up thinking the same thing, and we had to start all over again.
Yep. I think there's a lot in what you say there.
I think so. I mean, we had to start all over.
It's going to be hard to prove.
So anyway, so you go through, you decide to get into college, you decide you don't want to be a translator.
Yep.
Then what did you do from that time? Interpreter?
Well, I didn't know what to do, so I came to Japan.
Wait, this is after your 4 years, after you finished?
Yeah.
With the degree
when I was in my 3rd year, or probably the 4th year actually, I went to the careers office for the first time. I always tell my students to start thinking about careers in the 1st year. So students, if you're watching, start thinking about it in the 1st year.
Okay.
I didn't. I was probably just about to leave. And I went to the careers service, looking around, thinking I should have come here before. And then on the sign on the wall, there's just a little printed piece of paper saying, "Become a yen millionaire. Interested?" ? I thought, I always wanted to be a millionaire. And I said, yep. So I asked the careers person, I said, "That's for the JET program." and it's where we send graduates to Japan. The Japanese government hires graduates from universities all over the world and sends them to Japan to work in schools for a year, up to 3 years, but yearly renewable contracts. And I said previously, I had heard of this before.
Now, what year are we talking now?
This is 2000.
2000.
Yeah. 24
Become
years
a
ago.
yen millionaire.
Yeah, yeah. But a yen millionaire is a joke, right? Because
Okay,
a yen millionaire, of
I
course,
understand.
is
I
not
understand.
that big a millionaire.
Right.
All right, I probably got
A million yen. You can get a million yen, right?
I could go
A
to
yen millionaire.
yeah.
Okay.
I can be a yen millionaire by just going to the ATM.
But you
down
didn't
there.
know this at that time.
Well, I kind of
Well, you-
did.
you
but
kind of
it was
did.
a joke. It
A
caught
joke,
me.
but you thought, okay.
It caught me.
you.
And but I'd always thought, no, I'll never go to Japan. And my kids love this when I tell them this, because they Daddy, you never would have met Mummy, and we wouldn't be here, and you wouldn't be doing this and all that. But it's true. I literally had not thought about Japan. I knew nothing about Japan, and I had even said, just as an off-the-cuff comment a year before, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't go to Japan. And then I ended up interviewing at the embassy in London. The education ministry people, Monbusho, interview along with people from the embassy and local people as well. They're trying to work out who would fit in, who wouldn't cause any
For this
issues
jet program?
For the jet program. Yeah, it's quite a long. It's quite.
Interview
They're spending a lot of money. The Japanese government is spending a lot of money. You know, the Japanese government has to tick all the boxes before they can let any money go. So there was at least one, possibly two interviews, and then I think it was about 6 months wait until I found out that I was going to Japan. I had no idea about Japan, so I said, send me anywhere. I had ticked the box saying, I don't care where I go.
You didn't want to go to Germany or France since you spoke the language?
I'd already been there.
but to live is different.
Yeah, I'd lived in both for half a
you
year
had? Okay.
for the internships. I
Right.
did an internship in France as well. As a
Okay.
teaching internship in France.
see.
And I think I'd preferred the teaching rather than the translating. Anyway, 2000 July, I end up in Tottori prefecture, not knowing anything about Tottori or Japan. I couldn't speak a word of Japanese. It was an amazing 2 years. Because Tottori is the most rural, depopulated prefecture in Japan, or the smallest population, it was a real bonus for me because I like languages anyway, and I was able to learn Japanese, at least to a basic extent.
There were
in
no
those
other
days.
foreigners there?
Well, there were some other people on the JET program, and also one point I got involved in a language exchange program, which was multiple languages. There were Chinese, Arabic, Japanese, English, French as well, probably. And we used to meet together. Most of them were students at Tottori University. And we used to meet together and share languages and stuff, and that was fun. That's the kind of thing I liked in those days. Anyway, it was a great opportunity to learn Japanese, and it formed my life but having a good base at the beginning and then going on to learn it to business level, essentially, has formed what I do. I mean, I wouldn't be doing what I do now if I didn't have Japanese.
So you had to read and write as well?
Certainly reading. My handwritten is not good because
But you had to do that at that
It's
time.
the AI, right? We
Right.
don't need to handwrite anymore.
Even then, you did not have to.
Well, I
write.
did, I did.
At that time,
I
you had
copied
to,
out
because
all the
that's how you really-
kanji.
right,
I
of
copied out
course,
the
I'm sure
kanji,
you did.
several hundred, about
You had
600
to.
I got to
Yes.
in
yes.
those 2 years. I got about 600. And yes, it was 1,000 times each or
Right.
something like that.
Right.
But I
And then
haven't
you're done.
ever read
Right.
them.
You
I
don't
haven't
need to.
written them since.
You don't need to. No.
Yeah.
But you do. That's a good way to input it too.
Yeah.
You know, if
Oh,
you
it's
write
superb.
it, that's the way to do it, right?
Yeah. And did you
Most
do
of
that?
it. A little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's the multiple senses.
Right, and most
thing.
definitely.
Yeah, and it's not the same when you're just typing or with your thumb on a smartphone because it
Right.
does it all for you.
Right.
But of course, like you said, we don't need that anymore,
You don't.
and especially for somebody who has to take shortcuts because I'm not a mother tongue speaker of Japanese. I had to jump at various points to get over to the next level to ensure that I could do my job and ensure that I could be responsible to my colleagues, make sure that I wasn't dead wood, if you like. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Because otherwise, if you're not,
they're carrying you, right?
Yeah, they're carrying you. Yeah,
that's right.
And when I don't want to be carried.
So when you teach your classes now, are you doing it in Japanese?
I do some classes in Japanese.
But most of it's English.
My job, I do teach classes, of course, but most of my job is actually admin or organizational or research based. So it's about 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, I would say. I teach 6 classes a week, which is not an awful lot. 3 of those are English classes, which I teach history in English in those classes. 2 are seminar classes, which are at a high level with a very small bunch of students.
What's a small bunch of students?
Around 10.
And what's your regular class, basically?
30 or 40. Yeah. Well, that's fun, kind of normal. The English classes are for first years in this case. I enjoy doing that. It's just comes naturally. The first years are fun. They're still very pure. They're not looking into the careers yet. They're not looking at the wider world, etc. And it's fun. But I then enjoy working with the older students in a much, much more focused and personal way.
They actually have some opinions now, and
their opinions, but also I need to get them into the workforce and to be valid members of society. And it's different from just teaching a class to first years, which is much lighter. For the fourth years, we're talking how to get into the workforce, how to get into companies, how to get into regional government, administration, teaching, etc., and counselling them along the way. It's a long slog for these Japanese students.
You're counselling them as well?
To a certain extent, yeah. That's my job. That's my job.
Okay.
I'm there. It's called a seminar teacher. The seminar, teacher, I guess. Shido no sensei would be the Japanese word. So guider, almost. It's not only academic. It's actually about creating them as human adults and social members of society. Other teachers will be taking them on the law courses or the journalism courses or the economics or politics courses. I take mine for history, but as part of that, I make sure that they have presentation skills, discussion skills, critical thinking skills, and also when they're writing their graduation projects or their large, basically graduation papers, right? 7,000 words or something. We also talk about the careers, and that's my job.
What's the percentage difference between boys and girls in your classes?
It's probably about 50-50. We interview for those classes, so they have to come and interview, and I think I want 50-50, male female. I want probably shouldn't say this. I want some jokers. I want some serious people. I want some overseas students, perhaps a quarter to a third, which at the moment means from the People's Republic of China.
Really? So most of your students are Asian?
They're all Asian.
They're all Asian. You don't have any Westerners?
Ethnically.
Okay, ethnically. Okay.
Oh,
you might have one or two.
This is Nihon University. No, we at the moment, I don't think we'd have anybody in our student body, in our 4-year student body, who's not from Asia. I wouldn't have thought so. There are plenty of people of mixed race, like my children and your children, who are born, raised in Japanese, but with different heritage and different ancestry.
But they're not coming from overseas to come there, unless it's just for a short term.
Almost all of our overseas, we have some short-term people from all over.
Right, exchange students.
Yeah, exchange students.
Those, right.
I'm working with them from this year as well, which is going to be fun because then I'll be teaching at a higher level in English than I have done for a long time.
But it gives you a relief valve too, and helps you to check yourself too.
Yeah,
how you see it.
Absolutely,
that's the biggest thing I think. Whenever
that's
you're teaching,
spot on. Yeah,
that's right. It helps you to check yourself. How have I really been interpreting this when you have to explain to someone else in your mother tongue?
Yeah, it's a really good point.
That's something is self-awareness, and it helps you to become a better teacher. Everyone should have to, in a way, learn to teach. And I think teachers should be moved around out of their subjects.
Yeah.
So they're learning. Those are the best classes when the kids can see the person who's supposed to be helping them digest this information or absorb it are learning too. Instead of, this is just the way it is, and this is nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants to hear that. And especially when they know it's not spot on. That's your opinion.
Yeah. I think that's why I didn't like education much when I was a kid.
I sometimes feel that I was somewhat blessed that I wasn't academically inclined. They passed me by. I didn't learn to read until later, and they let me pass because I think I was quiet, didn't create any problems, and it was a big school, so they felt sorry for me, so they just passed me on, which was not doing me any favors, but I never became indoctrinated like the other kids that were trying to get the best grades and stuff. And I look at their lives compared to mine.
And
it's different. I'm happy with mine. I'm a rule breaker. I mean, the rules they're asking you to hold by, and you still have to believe that to go that way. That's why I like getting up at 2. I get up at 2:30 in the morning. I usually go walking. And I love walking that time in the morning here in Tokyo. I was talking to my mother-in-law last night, who I think she's 90 now. She's saying, why do you get up so early? I said, because there are no rules I have to follow. I can walk down the middle of the street. I can cross any time. The lights don't mean anything to me.
Where do you walk?
All over. All over Tokyo.
In the city?
In the city. I live right by Ebisu Garden Place. So I walk everywhere around this area within an hour of my place. Go on. And I just have a ball. And you see, and I was telling her, she said, don't you feel, isn't it dangerous? I said, this is not at all. I see young women walking around and they're not afraid. I can come by, and even when it gets colder and I'm wearing all black and black gloves and a knit cap, I pass by police, and the police know me now by all because we have so many embassies around here. They say good morning, I say good morning. They see me coming all the time. I love this area because of that. But the freedom in a big city, and then I see it during the day, and I'm thinking, I walk down the middle of that road.
You have a certain freedom. Everybody has a certain freedom in Tokyo because of its safety, and because of it's not the freedom to own a gun and shoot other people if they come into your property. It's a totally different. Yeah, exactly right.
That's fear.
Fear.
That's not freedom. It has nothing to do with freedom.
It's the freedom to go where you want, when you want, and what you just said about girls walking in the middle of the street, dark streets in the night. That's why I want my daughter to grow up in this country.
Thomas Lockley is best known for African Samurai. His love for that book. That book has taken him into so many areas of controversy that we were going to talk about that a little bit today. And he said he'd do that. But the one that he's doing right now is a brand new book he's come out with.
Gentleman from Japan.
Gentleman from Japan.
Yeah. And it's about...
Two boys, actually, too.
Two boys, but we concentrate on the main character.
He's 21 years old.
Yeah,
right.
About 21 years old at the time when he arrived in England at Queen Elizabeth I's court in 1588. It's called A Gentleman from Japan, and it is a book about history which people never think about, the history of early cultural contacts. It's just about taking off now as well. So if anybody wants to read it.
How long ago did you write it?
It came out 3 weeks ago, May the 21st.
But when did you finish the book?
Books take a long time. It took about 7 years to write, and then 1 year from finish of the first manuscript to going through the edits and then publishing. So the books are hard work, but they're fun.
Now, what about the African Samurai?
Yeah.
Now, you've had some controversy with that. You were telling me just before this that you have some friends that really love you because of this book.
And people that hate me because
people
of the
that
book
hate
as
you.
well.
What is that about?
Well, there's recently a computer game being announced. It'll be released, I believe, later on this year. It's called Assassin's Creed Shadows. And it's set in Japan. And lots of people have been waiting for years for one of this franchise, Assassin's Creed, to have a one set in Japan. And the protagonist, the main character, or one of two main characters in this computer game, is Yasuke, the African who served Oda Nobunaga, Japan's greatest warlord. and fought by his side at his death, essentially. And Assassin's Creed have resurrected Yasuke to be one of the main characters in their game. Now, some people love this, some people hate this, and because I'm the person that originally resurrected Yasuke and did the research into who he really was and where he came from and what he did and possibly the possibilities about where he went to.
What year was this that you did this? Did you resurrect him?
That book was published in 2019, 5 years ago.
No one had done it prior to you?
He had often been in a fictional character or a basis for a fictional character. For example, the manga Afro Samurai. So he's the basis for Afro.
That was before your book?
Yeah, all of these mangas and animes used him as a basis for their main characters.
So they knew he existed.
Yeah, he's
well known.
He's well known among.
But you're the first one to do a full
bring
book
him
on
out,
it.
bring the man out.
I was going to say something because back in the 70s when I was here, there was a guy that was a teacher. He's also a professor. He's a black professor, and he was about everything black because he's a little bit older than me.
Okay,
and he was pro-black.
Mm-hmm.
He told me, do you know one of the most famous samurais here was African?
Yes.
And I went, really? Like, how much do I know about Japanese history?
It was 68 that he really burst onto the scene in Japan. He was the protagonist in a book, a children's book actually, called Kurosuke.
In 1968?
1968, yeah. It was a children's historical, it was one of the precursors to what we call manga. It was half animated and half book form, Kurosuke. And then in 72, I think it was Endo Shunsuke, the very famous author who wrote Silence and all sorts of other stuff. He wrote a book called Kurombo.
Yes.
And that's probably the book which your
friend was talking about.
Was talking about, because that, I mean, anything that Endo wrote was huge at the time, and it would have just been fresh on his mind.
Well, that was the terminology that we were told as African Americans when we came here. If Japanese say that to you, that's like calling the N-word in America. Kurombo. But something that other people, I think the younger people don't realize, when I came here in 74, they used to have a Kurombo Taikai. People would get on TV in the summertime to see who could get the darkest.
Okay.
Really? And it was called Kurombo Taikai. The Japanese cherished it. And I would watch that. The contradictions, it just didn't make sense. But it was never as virile as America has made it.
Yeah.
With England's support. But anyway, you know, so I never felt offended when the Japanese said, because they had no emotions behind it.
Yeah. And I looked at the etymology of that word to find out what it actually meant. And it's originally from Kurombo, which is Sri Lanka. It's one of the old civilizations, capital cities of Sri Lanka. And Kurombo is actually derived. The etymology of that word is from Colombo.
But it's Kurombo in Japanese.
It came through somehow through the...
And what does it mean in Sri Lankan?
No, it
Black person?
No, in old Japanese, it meant somebody from Sri Lanka.
Oh, that's what it meant.
Yeah, with dark
skin.
Right?
Okay.
And therefore, originally, that's what it meant. And it was a word of respect for a fellow Buddhist kingdom. It was no disrespect.
Disrespect, yes.
Then in the 20th century, it took on a different meaning and came to, as you said,
but never with any. But no, that's what they said. They could say that, but they never said it with. It never vibrated the way it vibrated if someone were to say that in the States or in England. You just didn't. I don't think the English used it so much, but
probably not.
No, they didn't have to. They made sure they made sure their biggest colony did, America. So America said, well, let them But I never felt that.
No.
There was no reason for them, and they just did not vibrate the same way.
Yeah. There was a time also when there was a movement to ally with African places like Ethiopia, Abyssinia. In the 30s, there was it was brief, but it was there.
No, what's brief?
It was called an Alliance of the Dark Peoples.
Okay.
And there were
Wait.
Many
in Japanese, you mean that's how it was translated?
Yeah. Well, the policy, the government policy
Okay.
at the time was the concept of basically allying
African.
against the Caucasian, what you call
Okay.
the Caucasian empires.
Caucasian. Okay, right.
So Japan,
against.
yeah, absolutely. So
And this is during when?
this is the 30s, when in the build up to war, Japan knew that it couldn't really
Do it alone. Yeah.
fight alone, or didn't have the depth and also perhaps the moral backbone to make it happen. And there were moves which included Africa, Abyssinia and Ethiopia in particular, but also included bringing hundreds of thousands of Jews to Manchuria especially, but also to other territories held by Japan or controlled by Japan as settlers to share their expertise and other things. And that was called the fuguh plan. The Ethiopian plan, I don't know if it had a particular name, but it included marriage alliances between noble Japanese ladies and an Ethiopian prince. It was all over the newspapers at the time, and it fizzled out during the Italian invasion of Abyssinia in 36, and Japan was then concentrating on the war with China from the year after that. So it would have been a very interesting new direction in history, shall we say.
Hitler put a stop to all of that, I would think, after that too, because when they saw
Mussolini too.
the direction he was going in,
Yeah.
they said, "Okay, we'll leave the people of color alone."
Well, a lot of the Jews from Europe that got out over the Soviet Union came to Japan, tens and tens of thousands, as I understand it, and they settled and were safe. I wouldn't say they were comfortable. Many of them were sent to Shanghai, in the ghetto in Shanghai. Others were in Manchuria. A large community was in Kobe, about 5,000 in Kobe during the war. My grandmother was a refugee from Nazi Germany.
Okay.
A Christianized, her father was Jewish, baptized, and her mother was not Jewish, German. And they made life really hard. They made life
I don't think so.
My great-grandfather was a decorated war hero in the First World War for the German Reich. He fought 4 years and survived, which there can't have been many people who were in the battlefield for 4 years in the First World War and survived. And he became a lawyer afterwards. But when the Nazis came, he was forbidden from practicing. Forbidden from making money. He had no way of making money. In the end, he decided to become a pastor and was sent to New York, actually, for training in some kind of evangelical pastorship, training session. I'm not sure of the exact details. And so he was safe during the war years. My grandmother and her siblings and her mother were not smuggled out, that's the wrong word, but they were given special dispensation because they were Christians, not Jewish Jews. And they spent the war years in England, too scared to go into the bomb shelters, the public bomb shelters, because they were German. As the German bombs fell down around them, they huddled in the garden or wherever. It must have been scary.
I imagine it would have been.
Yeah.
War at that time or any time, I think, would be scary.
Yeah.
The controversy over your book, where does it stand right now? African Samurai.
Well, right now, I'm not quite sure. I've had some nasty comments on my Facebook page. I've decided to take down all my family photos from my Facebook page, my own stuff.
From Japanese, you've been getting these nasty comments? Or would you rather not say?
Actually, to be honest with you, yes, a few from Japanese, though these are the first time ever that I've had anything controversial from Japanese people about Yasuke. Yasuke is seen as a hero in Japan, and even in the 70s he was a hero, and he's only got bigger. I'm not going to say what some of these comments are, but they're not very nice. And but it's in English. Almost all of these comments or blog postings or massive amounts of stuff on YouTube. Some of them are not necessarily directed at me per se.
It's the idea.
But it's the idea. That's it. And I've decided not to not to give them credence by watching, but I
Sure.
get reports
Right.
from some people. I've got some beautiful messages on Instagram and things from people I don't know saying, you must be having a hard time at the moment, keep fighting the good fight, kind of thing. And I'm not fighting any fight.
You don't understand. Just right.
But it's lovely to have people, just random strangers.
That's the
saying,
majority. That's the majority of
Yeah.
people, I think, because of the way we are conditioned as human beings to either fight or flight. We like to focus on the negative.
Mm.
You know, they say entertainers or anything. When they're in an audience, it could be hundreds of thousands of people. The person they will remember is the guy that sat there and looked like he had a grimace or something. Everybody else could be everybody else could be happy.
Smile.
But there's always this one guy, and you'll focus on that. The same thing about the internet. We'll take that and we'll give energy to the one or two unpleasant comments, and we could have thousands of good comments. But because we know people won't focus, people won't, intuitively we know people don't want to hear about all the good news. But they would love to hear about that one guy that said, you were naughty for putting that in there. Really? Really? You know. But I wouldn't take it with that, because most of those people too have a problem. It's about them.
I think
It's never about your information. It's about them.
It's about
and they won't come out and say it in public because they know it wouldn't fare well for them. Go ahead, say that in public. Let us know who you are. They won't do it.
Personally, I think that Yasuke was a man, and he deserves to be given respect for what he did, which was absolutely amazing. To come from the other side of the world in difficult circumstances that we're not exactly sure what the circumstances were, and to rise to the top of another country's culture and be at the side of the greatest ruler of the time, at his death, fighting at his death, loyal to the end. It's an amazing story. And I think we should give somebody like that the credit they deserve. I don't know whether the game Assassin's Creed should have him as the main character or it should have somebody else as main character. Quite frankly, I don't care.
But you have nothing to do with it.
Nothing to do with it.
You see no royalties or anything.
Don't attack Yasuke. Don't, no, it's nothing to do. Though my book's starting to sell well again, which is
that's
nice.
Good.
Yeah, that's
good.
nice.
So they can get some background on it.
Yeah, but don't attack Yasuke as a man. Let's remember this man for who he was and the great things that he did.
Thomas, I think that we're getting closer to that now because we have access to more information and we get it much quicker now, and it can vibrate much louder now than it ever could before. So this person, which is probably the same person that wrote 5 or 6 times under different aliases.
You might be right.
This one person can actually look up through Google and so many other sources and find out, wow, some similarities between him and or her and this person, which we all have. We're talking about us, human beings. So I don't think it's anything to really put any more time and effort in. Do you have anything outside of A Gentleman from Japan that's coming up now that you've completed that book and is starting to get some traction?
It's getting some traction, and I'm going to dedicate the next few months to keeping that traction going. Once you've got traction on a book, it tends to start going on its own. You've got to get that traction, and nobody else is going to do that for you.
But that means you have to go out and give talks about the book. And
Correct.
That's the biggest thing. So where do you go to give these talks? Do you stand on the corner in Shibuya or something?
Yeah, that's it.
With the microphone and
the end is nigh. Right. Come and read my book.
No. Do you actually go out and solicit?
Podcasts are the big thing.
Okay, you got this one.
Podcasts.
Okay.
So
this one. Maybe you can get our numbers up. That would be a nice thing.
Please. I will put this on my.
Make sure you send it everywhere. You have to.
I will do.
Yeah.
Where was I? Yeah. Podcasts are big,
right.
Huge. Some people have approached me. Some people I've approached. At the beginning, I approached a few places, and then I started to take off as well, which is good. Having the Yasuke story come up is quite convenient because people have contacted me for comments or interviews about that. And I said, oh, look, I've got a new book.
That's right.
Can I appear with that as well? And, oh, yeah. And so that kind of has brought some traction. And the other thing is just sheer hard work. writing to newspapers, writing to magazines, asking them to feature it. 99 times out of 100, you don't get a reply, but one time you do get a reply, and that's great. You go for it, and hopefully that snowballs a bit. But then the talks thing, the live in-person talks, the old-fashioned ones, if you like, they're good because you meet the people that you're talking to, and you can be questioned by those in a way you can't do for podcasts.
You're going to be talking here, aren't you?
I'm talking here next week. I think it's next Wednesday.
This is the Tokyo American Club. You all know that. Oh, yes.
Maybe they don't. Maybe this is going around the world.
It's going around the world.
Yeah.
Yes.
We're going to get this on.
That's right.
We're going to get this on some amazing.
Well, that's one reason why I really want to get this out quick, because we came together for Marissa Moss's book, and that's where I met you. You came in on that, and then I said I have to have you on.
Thank you.
Because you're such a pleasant guy. It was nice to talk with you, and you have a good sense of humor, which we haven't shown you because we don't know how people might take it. I think both of us have a very similar sense of humor, and the things we may laugh at, you may not want to laugh at. So, all right. And I like telling you when I told you, I said, and you were kind enough not to say anything until I finished. I said, as an American who had his kids at the British school, people would ask me, why do you have your kids at the British school and you're an American? And I said, because the English do not think they're superior to Americans. They know they are. And you like that. You went, yeah, that's pretty good. There you go. There you go. There you go. That's good.
It's a pleasure being on this this podcast, this YouTube. It's amazing.
Isn't it something? Nowadays, what you can do, I remember when I first started, you have these big Sony cameras that were huge, and it was just difficult, and it cost you a fortune to do it. Now, you get your iPhones, put them up, and you go worldwide.
Boom, boom.
And it is broadcast quality.
Yeah, it can be.
It's so interesting.
It's amazing.
So interesting.
Yeah.
Before I end the podcast, Thomas, I always like to ask this question. If you could go back in time and meet the younger Thomas and give him advice, what advice would you give him, and how old would he be?
I would probably go back to around my kid's age now. So early teens or just preteen, 13 and 11 my kids are. And I'd do two things. One, I'd say don't take it so seriously. And the other thing I'd say, take it more seriously. Because there's certain things which you should take more seriously, and there's certain things you should take less seriously. Now, what those would be, I can't think about that right now off the top of my head, but I would like to be able to do that. But the thing is, I try and do that to my kids, and they ignore me. So probably the 13 or the 11-year-old Tom would also ignore the advice from the future Tom, because that's what
we do.
That's what we do.
Thank you so much, Thomas.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here.
It's really, really been an honor and a pleasure to be here with you.
It's been a pleasure talking with you. And listening to your stories. I'm telling you, I think the whole audience will.
Thank you.
I want to thank all of you for watching or listening to this podcast. And never forget, it's all unknown, so continue to reach for the stars.
Because you're too blessed to be stressed.